Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and on this occasion I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Gerald and Charlene Gallego of the Terrace get together. Shaughan, do you know who Gerald and Charlene Gallego are?
No, this is the point of the podcast where I tell you that I don't know who this duo is that you've told me about.
They were two American serial killers and rapists who were mainly active in Sacramento, California between 1978 and 1980. They murdered at least 11 victims, mostly teenagers, and often kept them as sex slaves before killing them. So
This feels like one of your darker ones.
Yeah, certainly not a couple to be trifled with anyway.
How did they select their targets?
I don't know, I didn't read that far down on Wikipedia.
I normally expect you to be more thorough than this.
No, sorry. I mean, it's like ideally they'd all be funny ones, like it's the Major Charles Ingram and Diana Ingram of the Terrace, but we've used that one in the past. I was going to use the Les and Janice Battersby of the Terrace, but I've got a feeling I've used that one in the past as well. The more this joke goes on, the harder it comes to selecting names, and therefore you got to become a wee bit niche with them. So I've gone for American serial killers from the 70s and 80s.
Okay, well, fair play. But I think they got caught and got their comeuppance.
Yes, they've both been destroyed, like a bully XL attacking someone at a petrol station. They've been destroyed.
Well, thank goodness for that. No longer a danger to the public.
Yes, definitely. And unlike the Gallegos, we are not going to keep you, the listener, as a sex slave, but we are going to keep you company for the next hour or so. And Shaughan and I are just really going to have a nice long chat about lower league Scottish football.
Yeah, I mean, we picked a few games. They weren't the most exciting in terms of the games, but there's other things that we can discuss.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast is like half 3-game podcast, half grab bag, and we're kind of not sure what it is, but once I figure it out, I'll be heading straight to the patent office. Really, Shaughan, I've got a lot on this week. You and I both have a lot on this week, but I felt as though I had to come back and step in and really save the lower league podcast after the state it got into over the past fortnight. You disappear for a couple of weeks and it falls totally into disrepute. I listened to last week's show and had a laugh at the start when Tony was introducing everyone, but then afterwards it was just like Donald Trump in a 2016 presidential election going, wrong. Apparently the Montrose winger's called Brad Lyons. Xander Murray's still playing for Bonnyrigg Rose Athletic.
Listen, we got Murray. Was it Murray Aitken's position wrong in the preview podcast? So we don't get everything right.
No, not having that, man. That was a lot of work that went into that, and we were allowed the one mistake. But when you're talking about 3 games, you should really be a bit more thorough than that. And it was mostly Craig Fowler, just so brazen and assured and confident in his own opinions, but so breathtakingly wrong. You know who he reminded me of? You know Darren Grimes, that little twink from GB News. It was just a really startling performance from the big man. So I've decided I'm so busy, but I'm going to come in and save the day. As I've got in my notes here, I'm here to talk about lower league Scottish football and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Is that from They Live, Rowdy Roddy Piper?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And
a kind of an enjoyably nonsense film.
Roddy Piper was in some pretty like daft movies in the 80s and 90s, but he had bags of charisma, so that's how he was able to carry it.
What was the one? It's something to do with, does it have the word Frogtown in the title?
I've no idea.
Right, okay, that sounded. I've not seen it. It sounds very bad, but you're right. He is a man with bags of charisma.
Well, we might as well. Hell Comes to Frogtown. Is that the name of the movie? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's let's describe the film is set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where few fertile men and women exist due to atomic fallout. Right. As a result, the government places a high priority on those who can still breed. Shortly before the movie opens, a group of mutant amphibians (brackets) who have been exiled to the desert by humans (close brackets) capture a group of fertile women and are using them as sex slaves. My goodness, the theme of this podcast really seems to be sex slaves.
I just remember the front of the video case when I used to go to the video shop when I was very young.
It's very striking. It's Rowdy Roddy Piper standing, holding a weapon. A woman is crouched on her knees with her arm wrapped around his thigh, and then these giant frogs just flanking him, and a very, very large one in the background.
Well, that's why I've never forgotten it.
No, it's certainly memorable. Certainly memorable. Almost as memorable as the season that Raith Rovers are having this season. Yes, managed to link that in there, and finally bringing the football. Yes, as Shaughan mentioned, we're going to be talking about a number of games, and this is by some distance the most exciting out of the lot of them. This is the match at the top of the championship. It was second versus first as Raith Rovers took on Dundee United, and it finished in a 1-1 stalemate. Lewis Vaughan continued his prolific start to the season, but his goal was cancelled out midway through the second half by a Louis Moult header. No change at the top of the table. Shaughan, you were there, part of the bumper crowd that were at Starks Park. Unspool your brain. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I learned anything that I didn't already expect would happen this season. I think Dundee United have the best team. They will probably still win the league. I think Raith Rovers look like a pretty decent outfit. I think they, at the very least, should be setting their sights and to be the best of the rest. But I mean, as much as there wasn't a lot of football played, like a big crowd, it felt like an occasion. It was tense, and as much as it wasn't a classic, but I still really enjoyed it. I suppose like the whole kind of sense of the occasion. It was good to be involved in it.
Yeah, look, I mean, you said it wasn't a good game. I've only watched the highlights from this match, and it did look quite entertaining. It looked like both teams had chances to win. Kevin Dabrowski was called into action, made a couple of saves, diving down to push shots past the post. Dundee United looked as though they were trying to play like football quite quickly, but Rovers were certainly holding their own. They could have won it with some of the chances they had later on in the match. It looked like a knockout match, but the highlights, perhaps what you're saying, aren't representative of the match itself.
I mean, I still enjoyed it, but it was. I suppose it was more patchy than necessarily enjoyable from like the first minute to the last. What I would say is I don't know if I necessarily agree with the opinion that it was. Well, no, I would agree with the opinion it's a game of two halves, but the consensus seems to be that Raith were the better team in the first half, Dundee United were the better team in the second half. I would agree with the second point. I actually thought that the first half was pretty even. I know Raith were a goal to the good. Neither goalkeeper was really called into action other than the Rovers goal. I was quite disappointed in Dundee United. Raith held them at bay, but I thought it was pretty even. And to a degree, I thought Rovers were a wee bit fortunate to go in a goal up, considering how the game had kind of played out. For the maybe first half hour of the second half, I would say Dundee United were clearly the better team. They certainly moved up a gear when Louis Moult came on. Oddly though, at full time, I kind of felt a wee bit frustrated, and that was only because Declan Gallagher went off. He went off about the 80th minute. I think he picked up a bit of a knock, and at that point, that's when the momentum of the game for that final kind of 10, 50 minutes, whatever it was the first time that Rovers probably had sustained pressure. And as much as Dabrowski had a good save with the last kick of the ball, I kind of felt there was a wee bit more in the game potentially for Raith Rovers, maybe potentially turning that kind of 1 point into 3. But ultimately, I got the impression that both clubs were reasonably happy with a point.
What do you make of Vaughan's goal? From watching the highlights, it looked like an absolutely abject piece of defending from, I think it was Liam Grimshaw that was playing at right fullback, or certainly he was one that looked like he was supposed to be marking Lewis Vaughan when that ball's chucked into the box, but there's no one around him. He's able to get a free header on goal, hits the post, and then comes back out to him, and he's allowed to finish to put the team one up. But there's no pressure on him at all. It looked as though that the Dundee United defence was about 6s and 7s at that point when that attack took place.
I mean, Vaughan initially had so much room. He kind of popped up between Grimshaw and Declan Gallagher. But even when he popped the header in and struck the post, Grimshaw and Declan Gallagher seemed to be looking at each other. And I must admit, I would have said that Grimshaw needed to react. But it felt like they might have just had a wee bit time to react. Like maybe they didn't have enough time to get there in time. I'm not sure. But nobody does react, and then it's Vaughan that kind of that gets a shot off. So yeah, poor defending. It was the only time in that first half that Rovers kind of caused Dundee United too much trouble. Albeit by the same token, Dundee United didn't cause them too much bother in the first half either.
And a very well taken goal from Louis Moult to pull level in the midway through the second half. A corner came in, flicked onto him, and just a bullet header from about 6 yards.
Yeah. I must admit, as soon as Moult came on, I was concerned. Put it that way. When the lineups were announced, there was a hope that Keith Watson would make it at centre-half for Raith Rovers. That wasn't the case. Scott Brown was again kind of trusted in the centre-half position and moved back from where he would normally be sitting in front of the back four. I actually thought Scott Brown done okay. Tony Watt was clearly trying to take advantage of him in terms of, obviously, Scott Brown isn't a centre-half. I think he fills in capably, but obviously what had been said, right, well, you kind of play off Brown and you'll probably be able to, there'll be something there for you. There'll be advantages and opportunities for you. That actually didn't come to pass. I actually thought Brown done okay. I've had to watch the goal a few times. I think it actually is Gallagher that gets a flick on at the near post. I think it's Brown actually that is actually found wanting, but that's probably the only time that he was at fault. And he doesn't do too much wrong. But regardless, like, Moult is alive and nobody else. Nobody else is.
Like, the same as yourself, Shaughan. I watched that goal back a couple of times, and a lot of time you lose a goal from a set piece, you kind of look at the faults in the team. Was somebody not picking someone up? Was someone lose a bit of concentration there? I don't think that's the case. I think that when it's like a second ball like that, and what I mean is there's been one passage, not a passage of play, but there's been one action followed by a second action, which something like that flick on can throw people off balance, and especially if it's a position that you're asking Scott Brown to come up against the best attacker of the ball on the pitch there. That's always a big ask, and it's a very well taken goal. And yeah, I don't think there's anyone you can blame for that. Well worked goal, and it reminded me a bit of. And I'm saying this probably because this is the only time we'll get to mention this in the podcast. So it reminds me of one of Terry Christie's routines with Stennismuir, sort of the ones from the mid-90s where it was a ball played into the near post and just flicked on. And I think Stenny got a lot of joy from that. So maybe Jim Goodwin's been talking to the erstwhile greatest part-time manager the country's ever produced. Who knows? But I mean, do you think we've learned anything about the sides from this match? Any conclusions that we can make about either of them? Was it just that, as you say, both teams seemed content with a share of the spoils?
In terms of what I learned, I probably wasn't as impressed by Dundee United as I thought I might be. Certainly before Moult came on, I didn't think they troubled Raith that much. And when Gallagher went off, and I think it was Ross Graham that came on, they certainly looked a good bit weaker at the back. So in terms of United this season, like, I know there's been comments from Jim Spence, I think on Friday night, said he said that he asked the question, which is an interesting way to frame it, as if, like, therefore, because he says, I'm asking myself, can United go the season unbeaten? Almost like where you kind of pick him up on it if they do, because he's just asking a question rather than making the statement. I don't know. I wasn't impressed by Dundee United as much as I thought.
Imagine putting him in a headlock. I mean, imagine putting him in a headlock and Wanderer in Burke Hill. Sorry, Shaughan, you were saying there.
That's okay.
You enjoy Jim Spence. You were talking about how much you enjoy him as a person and a pundit and a political commentator.
No, I was just saying that he had positive.
Common sense. Spence talks sense.
He'd posited the question if Dundee United could go the season unbeaten. I don't think they will. I wasn't overly impressed by them. I don't even think they're as good as the last Dundee United team that got promoted from this division. Bear in mind that had, I don't know, Siegrist in goals and Shankland up front. That team was better, and that team didn't go unbeaten. I think that they are. Bear in mind they made a lot of when they were doing a lot of the recruitment in the summer. Guys like Ross Docherty and I'm trying to think who else they brought in.
Kevin Holt.
Yeah, you're right. Players that are good championship players. Bear in mind when they came down, they were a poor Premiership side. I do think that Gallagher and Moult, of course, elevate them, but when they're not there, and Gallagher did go off with a knock, Moult came on while recovering from a knock, that really takes them down like a massive, massive degree. So there is something there for other teams in that division to aim for. So I wouldn't necessarily rule out Raith Rovers. I wouldn't necessarily rule out Partick Thistle. But ultimately, Dundee United have the best team. Whether tactically, Jim Goodwin has a lot going on there, other than we have the best team and I think we'll win every week, I'm not entirely sure. But I wasn't as impressed by Dundee United as I thought I would be. And in terms of Raith Rovers, what I'm maybe confirmed is they look like they could very much be the best of the rest, and that would ultimately be, if that is the case, then you can only put that down as a success come season's end.
That's very good. Sorry, we're recording this podcast by video. So Craig Phil wants to record this podcast by video. Haven't washed my hair since the weekend. I'm washing it tomorrow. I look fucking shit. I'm catching a glimpse of my reflection. I'm listening to what you're saying with my ears, but looking at my face with my eyes, and I just look dreadful. So I should have prefaced that entire podcast by saying that.
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say you look dreadful.
Nah, I'm beginning to look run down. I've got the T-zone in my cheeks. I'm getting just bad skin. I need to go and see a dermatologist. If there's anyone who can recommend a dermatologist, I'm going to imagine most of the people listening to this podcast have all got horrendous skin and problems with acne. So if you know a good dermatologist, please get in touch with myself and Shaughan. Well, certainly Shaughan's got great skin, actually. Leave Shaughan out of it. Come to me directly and pass on the details.
I could pass the information on to yourself, though. If you want to come directly to me, I can pass them to yourself.
Really? Oh, perfect. Then please do send me a WhatsApp as soon as we finish recording.
Yeah, no worries.
I got very much like Narcissus. I mean, that's where the term narcissism comes from. He was distracted by his own reflection and ended up falling headfirst into a pond. Big divvy. But I was going to ask about Kevin Dabrowski, because there was a Patreon podcast recorded where I think Andy Harrow was talking about. Andy Harrow, I think Tony Anderson, I think might be Robert Borthwick. They were talking about players that were on the fence about, players that you can't quite make up your mind about. Going by the highlights, again, Dabrowski looked like he had a pretty good game here. Some really important saves. Not that he was massively taxed in the match, but good, strong saves to push the ball down for corner kicks and blocks. I mean, what did you make of his performance? Have you warmed towards him a bit more?
I think I have. He had, in terms of Saturday, he probably had 3 saves that stuck out. I do think that he makes the routine, like he has a style about him that makes the routine look very good.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he makes the most of saves. And I thought that 2 of the saves that he made, I would expect them to make. He had one from close range. I think Dundee United had just equalised at the time. I think it was 1-1, and he had one from close range that was excellent.
Yeah, that was a smashing save.
That was
a really
very,
save.
very good save. But I don't think that's ever been an issue with Kevin Dabrowski. I think his save-making skills and his reactions are tremendous. The issues are, is he willing to leave his line? Is he willing to catch a ball? Even when he's not under pressure, is he willing to catch a ball? He would far rather punch it. There was a couple of examples on Saturday when there was deliveries into the box that he did come and claim, and that is quite unusual for him. So whether that's something that the Rovers are working on, I know, he's no young in terms of a football player. He's 25. He doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of playing games. So you would imagine they're attempting to work on it. I know Robbie Thompson is apparently a very good goalkeeping coach. So they won't. It's not as if they won't be aware of it, and they will be working on it. But tentative signs that maybe in terms of commanding his area, that there might be tentative signs that's improving.
No, that was good. Good. I'm pleased to hear. It seems to be improving. Pleased that Raith Rovers did well. And on top of that, Shaughan, it looked like, obviously both goals came down at Dundee United's end, but when Louis Moult scored, the scenes there looked brilliant, and particularly just the scenes around the ground, it looked like both sets of supporters were just like really up for it.
I would agree. You're absolutely right, and I suppose there is Raith is a reasonably small ground, so the fact that there was whatever it was, was it 6,800 or whatever?
That's really good.
Like, the capacity isn't much more than that. So when you can fill it, then it does produce an atmosphere. The problem is, and I've always said this about Starts Park, for the vast majority of the time, it's slightly too big for what they need. So if you bring 2,000 or 2,500, there's even been points this season where they've had just over 3,000, but it still feels like exactly as it is. It's a half-empty stadium, so sometimes it's difficult to generate an atmosphere. But no, that wasn't the case on Saturday, and it was just, it was good to be a part of.
Good. Pleased to hear it. On top of that, I just want to praise Raith Rovers' highlights package. Excellent stuff. Just excellent stuff, like proper 4K, multiple angles. You get a really good feel for the match. Just, really, really good stuff. Really good stuff. But we've talked about the match that you went to at the weekend. Let's unfortunately talk about the match that I went to at the weekend. And there really isn't much to say about this one, but we might as well discuss it because I was there and it's another talking point. If you were at the match at the top of the championship, I went to the match at the bottom, well, certainly towards the bottom of the championship. This was Queen's Park's 0-0 draw with Greenock Morton at Hampden. It was a game between two very out of form teams. It was Queen's Park's first point in 6 matches. Meanwhile, it was Morton's 6th point of the whole season. I chose to go to this one because I was working in the morning and into the afternoon. I wasn't able to go to Elgin versus Stennismuir, although that was postponed anyway. That was postponed by about 8:30 in the morning. But nevertheless, I went to Hampden because I wanted to just get a look at the teams that I've, again, only really watched the highlights packages. And yeah, this was not good. This wasn't great.
No, and you pretty much realise that instantly when you watch the highlights, which lasted. I can't remember if I clicked on Morton's highlights or Queen's Park. Whatever one lasted 5 minutes and 15 seconds is what I clicked on. And the very first footage is of a free kick that drifts harmlessly out of play. And I was like, my goodness, they are already having to come up with filler, even though it only lasts 5 minutes. It looked atrocious.
I mean, I'll be honest and say I've been to poorer games. I have been to poorer games, but just this just felt very, very flat, and I'm not sure what it is. It's like there just feels like a bit of a malaise about Queen's Park at the moment, and I'm not sure if it was because of the team's poor form, if it was because of the weather. I mean, it was dreadful weather. There was talk that even some of the Morton fans weren't able to travel because there was no trains running from Inverclyde to Glasgow.
The Morton players weren't able to travel.
Yeah, of course. Morton were only able to list like 3 substitutes, 2 outfield substitutes in that match, and the players like Ian Wilson had to play at right back for the match. He's nominally a central midfielder. I'm not sure because it was back at Hampden, and what I'm trying to say, having been to see Queen's Park play at Hampden in the old days, I'm talking about their amateur days, there was something quite fun about that. I can't quite put my finger on what it was. I think it might have been the sort of like, what on earth is an amateur part-time team doing playing at one of the best stadiums in the country? There was a novelty to that. And that just wasn't there this time around. And it was like cold and it was wet. I remember taking my seat. It was wet. I'd sat in wet like water, so I had a wet backside for parts of the game. On the way in, you get scanned by someone with a metal detector, and just that doesn't create a good impression at all. And it's just I just kind of thinking it was cold. It just wasn't nice. The football was poor. The sort of the first impressions you get going into the ground were poor, and it just really feels like bleh at the moment with Queen's Park.
I mean, I'm presuming you don't know the answer to this question, but or maybe you do. Maybe you asked the question when you went in. Bear in mind, I've been to Hampden, I don't know, dozens of times for Scotland games. I've never had a metal detector run over my body. Why did they decide that was necessary for Queen's Park Morton?
No idea. I'll be honest and say the old boy that was scanning me. You ever seen that video of the steward down in England, and it's like the guy just sort of like he just basically doesn't even touch the guy, sort of puts his hands across his shoulders down the side and waves him in. I mean, it was that degree of enthusiasm in which I was patted down there, so it wasn't very vigorous, but nevertheless, it doesn't create a good impression, and it puts you on the back foot a little bit. Like you feel as though you're being treated like this because you've done something wrong. And that's not the case, and particularly in such a low stakes encounter where it is like Queen's Park and Morton, who, I mean, both sets of supporters hardly renowned for their violence in the terraces. It's just not great. It's just not great.
It kind of adds to this whole thing about Queen's Park this season, where it just feels like A, their fans aren't being listened to, and B, they're being treated quite shabbily. And in fact, I'm saying this season it's been going on longer than that. I was reading about the fact that they have it's like a kind of supporters bar, but it has pretty much no kind of semblance of, like when you walk in, there's no kind of semblance of Queen's Park, or there being a kind of Queen's Park social club of any stretch of the imagination. Yeah,
you're absolutely correct. I didn't do that. Instead, I got there quite early. I went to Greg's and ate it in my car. So it was a sort of real, like, my wife's chucked me out the house and I'm just trying to figure out my next move sort of vibe that I was given off on Saturday afternoon. So I ate my Greg's in the car, so I didn't go into the Queen's Park Social Club. It did cross my mind, however, and I have read those comments from supporters in Pye and Bovril. that like identity is such a big thing, and we've spoken about it on previous podcasts that Queen's Park really have a unique identity compared to the rest of the clubs in Scotland. And I do appreciate that you have to change with the times. Like Queen's Park have changed a lot, and they have to change because of the nature of Scottish football. The trapdoor opening at the bottom of League Two, and there was a real worry they would get left behind. So they have had to change, but you can change in a way that's organic and you take everyone with you along the journey, and that hasn't been the case. And I was thinking, not to mention Stenhousemuir again, but I mean, you go to the wee bar at Oakville View, you've been there a couple of times, you walk through that door, you get a real sense that this is for Stenhousemuir supporters. It is covered in football pennants from games that have taken place at Oakville View, from friendly matches that the Warriors have had, like in the Scottish Cup or whatever. Pictures of the promotion in 2009, the promotion in 2018, photographs on the wall of like Sean Higgins and Sean Dixon celebrating scoring the equaliser against Rangers at Ibrox in 2014. So you get a real sense, this is Stenhousemuir, this is for fans. And for Queen's Park, who have probably got a richer history than Stenhousemuir, the Scottish Cup winners, of course. Like I mean, they must have won league titles as well. I mean, long time ago, right enough, but still part of history. Why would you not want to celebrate that, embrace that, and have all this stuff up on the walls and say, look at all the amazing things that this football team's done? I don't understand it. And again, if I was a fan going into the bar that's soulless, it just happens to be next to the ground where you're playing, could be anywhere, waved down by stewards like with a metal detector, aye, not great.
I don't understand it in terms of it's like there are. In terms of common sense, in terms of when you try and run a club, surely the majority of the decisions that you make, the fans essentially need to be at the heart of it. Yeah. And if you're not doing that, then fans and the support base are going to get pissed off. And it very much feels like the Queen's Park are in that position. And whereas they were kind of doing similar things last season, I suppose, as well. Fans were getting pissed off at what was happening off the park. However, they were still... you had so much success on the park. I mean, they were 45 minutes, I was going to say 90 minutes, they were 45 minutes away, potentially from promotion to the top tier. It doesn't feel like they're anywhere near that kind of level this season. So it feels like there's issues on the park, off the park. I suppose it's a kind of perfect storm.
Well, that's probably a good opportunity to talk about the match itself. And we'll start by talking about Queen's Park. And you can... What would describe this Queen's Park team as like, and just follow me here. It's like, you ever looked at koi carp in a garden pond?
I think so.
Right? And you know when you just look down, it's just like fish swimming about in a pond. But when the light catches it in the right way, it can look absolutely magnificent. That's what Queen's Park remind me of. But in a way, it's like the football is largely poor. It's quite cautious. It's quite safety first. They try to play football in the quote-unquote right way. But it's just a bit sterile. But occasionally there'll be a couple of nice passing. The ball's quickly brought upfield, and Dom Thomas does something, and a really good ball's put in. I mean, there are chances, I think, Rory Payton hit the post at one point. And at that point, you think, you can see what they're trying to do. It just doesn't happen often enough. The best player in the park by miles, streets ahead of everyone else, was Jack Thompson. He was excellent in midfield. Anytime, I'm not exaggerating, anytime he got the ball, he just had drive and dynamism and wanted to carry the team forward. And anytime he got in possession, you really felt like something was going to happen. But he was taken off with about 20 minutes to go. And I don't know why. I'd spoken to, at the end of the match, I spoke very briefly to Keith McAllister, who appeared on a VT with a view for the terrace about Queen's Park's transition. Yep. He'd been following the Spiders for about, I think it's nearly 45 years he's been following Queen's Park. I spoke to him briefly at the end, and I said, why did we take Thompson off? And he was like, no idea. Robin Veltman seems to think he can only last like 60, 70 minutes, so off he comes. And when he went off, you just think, well, they don't have that drive. Even guys like Dom Thomas, Barry Hepburn flitted in out the match. Rory Payton hit the post, but didn't really have much of an impression other than that. They really miss Simon Murray. They really miss Simon Murray. It's almost like 12 months that I've been for the visits I've been to Hampden. I've been there, I think it was December last year when they played Hamilton Accies. They were 4-0 up at half time. Absolutely blitzed them in a 15-minute spell. And Simon Murray was incredible during that period. And if they had someone like Simon Murray in the team that can just stretch defences and just through sheer force of will, if they had someone like that in their team, I think they would benefit massively from it, but unfortunately they don't, and the whole team looks weaker for it.
I do wonder if how maybe even both teams played on Saturday, which maybe I'm just trying to make excuses for such a terrible game, but like they're both out of form, out of sorts.
Yeah.
Expected more for both teams this season, but a lot of the criticisms about Queen's Park is how naive they've been, how open they've been, how high the line is. So maybe it was a bit of reset in terms of, right, well, maybe we need to be not necessarily less gung ho, but almost less ambitious. I noticed. Was Charlie Fox on the bench? I noticed he didn't.
Yes, he wasn't playing. They went with
Will
Alex
Tizard
Bannon
and Alex
Will
Bannon.
Tizard.
Yeah.
That's right. They were playing centre back.
And I'm not saying that Charlie Fox is all to blame for Queen's Park's malaise this season, but they didn't concede too many chances. So I suppose maybe both teams could say that there is something to build on after taking a point. But it was bereft of anything.
I mean, in his post-match interview, Robin Veldman said it's the kind of result that will send fans home with a smile on their face. I'm going to disagree with you there, Robin. You might be grateful with the point. It might have stopped a rot, but you're taking on the worst team in the division at home, who are depleted because of injury, because they've got a small squad, because of an act of God, for want of a better expression. And you didn't really create much of a chance. You didn't really create any chances against them, just a handful of them. And as for Morton, they'll probably be chuffed with the point as well in the circumstances, but they're a poor side. What they tried to do was just get the ball up quickly to George Oakley and Robbie Muirhead and just try and bludgeon their way through. And I don't think they had a shot on target until about an hour into the game. And I think the only time that they actually looked like scoring, they had a header off the crossbar, and then that came back into play, and then was headed off the line again. Other than that, not great. I'm not sure that Alan Power and Grant Gillespie's right balance in the middle of the park. I think both players are quite similar. Like Ian Wilson had some nice touches, but again, he's the boy that they brought in to play in the middle of the park. They had to field him at right back. Just not fantastic. But, in the circumstance, maybe taking a bigger picture view of both sides, as you say, might be grateful because of how poor they've been. Beg your pardon. I just saying it wasn't Robin Veldman that said he hopes the fans have a smile on their face. It was Dougie Imrie that said he hopes the fans have a smile on their face. I take that back. So Chris, I've done a fouler there.
I mean, the one positive about Morton is that I think the loan signing of Tyler French is a very good one, and for two reasons. A, it allows him to play Tyler French, who I think is a very good defender.
He was fine. I played fine.
And it allows him to not play Kirk Broadfoot.
Yes, you and I had a discussion during our big preview podcast about the merits of Kirk Broadfoot. I was favourable. Mm-hmm. I was wrong about that. He hasn't played particularly well since he's joined the Tawn. But nevertheless, I mean, that was bad, Shaughan. Probably the worst part of the day was thinking that I'd lost my car keys. Absolutely mortifying moment.
Was this so? This is obviously after you've consumed your Greggs in the car, went into the game, and you thought you'd lost your car keys.
So what had happened was, I always keep my car keys in my back pocket. Always keep my car keys in my back pocket. Always keep my car keys in my back pocket.
Sounds like you don't. I'm already presuming that not always.
Not always. Most of the time, apart from this occasion. What had happened was they've got the clock behind the goals on either side at Hampden. It got to about 90 minutes. This is terrible. I'm going to beat the traffic here and get up the road. So I was strolling, left my seat, walked down, walking towards the exit, and I put my hand in my back pocket like the mum in the Asda. You're dun. Yes, exactly. And I was like, fuck, it's not there. My key's not there, and you're thinking, geez, where is it? So I had to trudge back to my seat, and there's a boy sitting just a couple of seats ago who says, "Oh, so good you had to come back. You wanted to be here for the final." So I was like, "No, I've lost my car keys. I've lost my car keys." He's like, "Oh," and there's some people in front of us heard, some people behind me heard, and they're all doing that thing where they sort of all raise their feet up and they're looking down, and no, what does it look like? See, it's like a wee black clam for a Vauxhall Corsa. Like, no, I'm not seeing it. I was like, fuck him. The worst thing that was going through my head, there was two things. One, I'd actually bought food as well as the Greggs. So I bought stuff from Tesco and I bought stuff from the Greggs. I had milk in there. So I'm thinking, geez, oh man, that's going to be in there overnight. I've wasted money on milk and chicken. The other thing was, I really want to get up the road for the Hamilton Accies Falkirk game. I was like, I'm going to miss this because I'm going to have to get the train from Mount Florida back to Central, then get from Central out to my flat. It's like, I've made an absolute disaster here. So then when I was, the families had kind of looked around, couldn't see it. Like, I'd kicked some rubbish out the way, couldn't see it. Spoke to a steward and say, listen, I think I've lost my car keys. And me and two stewards did a sweep of the row. Me and two stewards did a sweep of the row, like the stewards do, at the end of the games. Not there. I was like, geez, oh man, this is horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Went and spoke to another steward, and this is when I was speaking to Keith McAllister. I went and spoke to another steward, and he said, we'll go and check lost property, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to have to phone us and come back in tomorrow. So I was like, fuck this, I don't have to come back to Hampden on a Sunday. I don't know what the trains are going to be like. It's like I've walked to Hampden previously. It's about an hour and a half walk. All this stuff going through my head as I was heading towards Cathcart Road. I'm going to miss Falkirk Accies. This is the whole centrepiece of the weekend. I'm going to miss Falkirk Accies. Then, I saw my car, in my peripherals. So I was walking down past Lesser. I was going to go on the Cathcart Road there. And I was thinking, go and just have a look. Go and just have a look in your car. And sure enough, I got to the window, my face pressed against it like Charlie Bucket looking in the confectioners. Yes, the car key was there still in its thing. Hallelujah. I popped so hard into the car, sort of cuddled the steering wheel, and then that was it, back up the road to watch another terrible game of football. So that was it. I thought that, my goodness, this Queen's Park Morton game's been absolutely rubbish, but at least I'll get the chance to watch something good when I tune in to Falkirk Hamilton Accies. And no, 2 matches, 0 goals, total waste of a weekend.
Do you know what should have been the giveaway that you didn't have your car keys on you?
What?
When they put that metal detector over you when you went through the turnstile. And it didn't bleep. That should have been the giveaway. You're like, oh my, well, that should bleep.
When they put it over my backside, whoop, no, there was nothing there. That's it. I said, I'm really sorry, I'll need to return to my car. The worst thing was, it was like the families around me and so on, all chipping in to try and help and all that. And God bless them, because they all seemed like really nice. A couple of people got in touch with me on Twitter afterwards, saying delighted that you found your car keys. So that's good. I'm delighted to be here to tell the tale.
All's well that ends well.
And there's another thing as well I wanted to just say. There was a Queen's Park fan I got speaking to on the way in after I'd been patted down, after I'd been in a full cavity search, who said, where have you been on the Lower League podcast? I've missed you. I didn't say I've missed you, but he said, where have you been? And I said, I've been away, but I'm back. I'm back to record. I didn't catch his name, but thank you for listening, sir. And I hope you were able to make it home quicker than I was.
Well, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing.
Just before we go on to talking about Falkirk Accies, there's street talk that Martin Bucher, Queen's Park's director of football, is wanted by Ajax, one of the biggest clubs in the continent, as I'm going to assume a director of football, sporting director, technical director, similar position that he's in just now.
Yeah, it's both very surprising, and considering what Queen's Park have gotten up to over the last 2 or 3 years, kind of unsurprising. In the same breath.
I mean, he's got a phenomenal reputation at AZ Alkmaar, I'm sure, so that's where he'd have got his name. I think that Queen's Park picking him up in the first place would have been a massive coup.
There is, I believe he's under a 10-year deal, which is unusually long.
I'm sure Ajax can afford to pay out to buy the rest of his contract.
If he does go, and you would imagine if Ajax are interested, then he will. It'd be interesting to see how that affects the fact that they obviously have this plan, I suppose, to recruit young players and then bring them through. I mean, ultimately they are. It almost feels like they are a youth team with a couple of experienced players, and I kind of feel like they could do the same thing, but do it slightly differently. Just have more experienced players and have a handful of young players rather than the opposite. So if it does come to pass that he leaves for Ajax, it'll be interesting to see if they are still steadfast for going down the same route that they're doing at the moment, which I don't know if it's doing them any good, or whether they want to alter it slightly to a degree.
Well, the whole club is effectively built around his grand vision for it. So if he was to go, you either bring in someone that can effectively do the same sort of thing or wants to do the same sort of thing, or you completely change the structure of the club. And it doesn't feel like this project, and I'm loath to use that term when talking about football teams, but it feels like this project, you've got to keep on doing what you're doing. I don't think it makes... I mean, Bucher said, I'm sure, that you probably won't see the fruits of our labours here for like another 10 years. Oh, class. That's great. That's great. But I do think that's the case with this project. It is a real long-term thing that is going to take a lot of time for it really comes to fruition. And to jack it in after a couple of years off the back of, I mean, what a bad 10 months, like pretty much since they sold Simon Murray, the performances haven't been too fantastic on the pitch. But I do think it's worth pursuing with this.
I mean, it depends.
This venture.
Perhaps part of it depends on what he has already put in place. Maybe he has something in place that somebody could step in and essentially just pick up the reins and continue with as is. If not, then I would imagine it would be impossible to continue as is.
Yeah, because say you got I think Owen Coyle type. Owen Coyle comes back in for a second and just guts it and starts signing all guys who are about like 30.
John Hughes.
Oh, could you imagine? Maybe that's the role for John Hughes. Like, it could be Queen's Park's new director of football.
And I could imagine that, actually. Like, Queen's Park just do things that are unusual. So, yes, I could imagine that.
Before we actually, talk about doing things unusual, we'll flip it because we're going to talk about Falkirk Khakis, but we'll not do that. Would you want to talk about Edinburgh City's new manager in terms of doing things unusual? This is Michael McIndoe, who has been appointed the new manager of Edinburgh City. He's replaced Alan Maybury. Michael McIndoe had a fairly successful career in the English lower leagues, was a 2-time Scotland B cap. He joins on a 3-year contract, last in charge of Gretna 2008. He was there for about 7 months until April this year, did relatively well. Shaughan, what's your thoughts on Michael McIndoe pitching up at Meadowbank?
So I have to say, I didn't know that there was such a kind of farrago about McIndoe joining Gretna 2008. That had completely passed me by.
That's probably what he wanted.
Yes, I get the impression that is the case. With that in mind, I am surprised that I suppose he wants to work further up the football pyramid. However,
I suppose though this is the opportunity to explain about Michael McIndoe's background, and this is all public knowledge as well. This isn't just street talk that Shaughan and I are repeating. But Michael McIndoe, alleged fraudster, accused of operating a huge Ponzi scheme, left a lot of people out of pocket. Jimmy Bullard, for instance, who's well known from his time at Wigan and going on like I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here. He lost £600,000 in the scheme, and a former teammate described McIndoe as the most hated man in football. And there's a really interesting article on The Athletic. This was written when he was the manager of Gretna 2008. I think this was written last year.
Yes,
a couple of months ago.
When he joined Gretna.
Yeah, so it was Daniel Taylor that wrote it, who of course made his name at The Guardian, very good journalist. And he wanted to go to a Gretna match to maybe like find out what the fuss about, maybe even get an interview with Michael McIndoe, but Michael McIndoe just will not talk to the press. That was one thing at Gretna. He allowed his assistant to do all the work, to do it, feel his media obligations. And there's a quote that I wanted to read out from Daniel Taylor's article. This is it. Teammates tell the story at one of his former clubs about how McIndoe used to take a briefcase into the dressing room and, having given her alcohol, presented the impression that he was carrying important documents about property and investment. One day, the other players forced it open. Inside, there was a pencil and a calculator. Should probably say as well, though, that New Scotland Yard's fraud investigation into him was dropped about 3 or 4 years ago. Michael McIndoe says that he has done nothing wrong, but nevertheless, it just feels very left field. I think that's if you're trying to be as euphemistically as possible, this is a very left field appointment from Edinburgh.
Yeah, I mean, I know McIndoe says that he just received loans from players, and it wasn't a kind of Ponzi scheme. Okay, I mean, fair enough. I don't really understand it from... Well, I suppose I do understand it from Edinburgh's point of view, because they're desperate. They look like I know they're only 6 points behind Annan. They look like they will potentially be cut adrift. Certainly that performance against Kelty at the weekend.
Yeah, terrible.
It wasn't any better than under Alan Maybury. If anything, it looked considerably worse. So they are in a very, very precarious position. And McIndoe, certainly his record at Gretna, they won more games during his time there than they'd won in the 3 previous seasons put together. I will caveat that with, that's not because he won lots of games, it's just that they'd won so few games the 3 seasons previous. However, it was a success, I suppose, to a degree. But bearing in mind, there will be, you would imagine, an element of scrutiny that the club will come under. McIndoe clearly didn't even want to speak to the in-house media team at Gretna, and made it quite clear he didn't want to speak to the media in general. He will come under closer scrutiny. I know there's a thing, well, it's Edinburgh, so he might go under the radar. I don't think that will be the case.
So in the SPFL, it's now, you might have got away with that at Gretna, but it's the SPFL, and even though Edinburgh are a relatively small club to that, that becomes like sort of like any time there's a managerial appointment, that's the sort of thing that becomes, it goes on like the BBC website, for instance, it goes on the STV website, and even on Pie and Bovril, you're seeing some comments from the Edinburgh supporters saying like when you Google his name, it's sort of like there's an intake of breath. Your eyebrows, I think one person said your eyebrows sort of go like disappear off your face because they've raised that far.
I mean, as I said, I suppose us as a good example. I didn't know anything about it until he was appointed, and I had to Google it. I think the first 4 or 5 kind of Google results are all about that, and I think the 5th was about the fact that he didn't pay 30 glamour models for an appearance at a nightclub. But there's a lot of people who are owed a lot of money by Michael McIndoe.
A lot of people plus 30.
No, there are people as well.
I think that there's obviously when you've got that hanging over you, people will be automatically suspicious. Now there's still space for people who have done wrong to come and work in Scottish film. Looking at like David Martindale's a perfect example of it. I think David Martindale's the exemplar for the power of rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as soon as he was caught out, he's like holds his hands up, pleads guilty to it, goes to prison. But then when he's in prison, he does an Open University degree in project management, and it's a real good story, like David Martindale's story. I think that if someone like that got involved with Stennismuir, I would be very, very worried, because further down the food chain, there's less eyeballs on it, there's less scrutiny, and if there might not necessarily be the fan base to demand change, or if anything untoward happens. So I'd be concerned about that. You know, something he might turn out to be an absolutely fantastic manager. He might be able to resuscitate Edinburgh's season based on what we've seen so far. I mean, they're only 6 points adrift. I mean, we're only at 3/4, so there's 3/4 of the season left to go. So there's still plenty of time to do it. I just wonder, like, why he went to Edinburgh, why Edinburgh have embraced him. I don't know if he's bringing an outside investment or whatever. I don't know, but it just seems like for Edinburgh, why would you want to go to someone that's probably doesn't have the best reputation? I mean, there's a good podcast. Sorry, there's a good podcast that Craig Fowler and Ali Moncrief record. Ali Moncrief's an Edinburgh City fan. I think he's closely involved with the club as well. I think he worked really hard over the summer to effectively ensure the club were still kept afloat. It's a really interesting podcast. Ali's always good when he's on it. Although apparently you get it quite tight in their group chat. You call it Fife cunt.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. It was that Fife idiot.
Right, okay, sorry.
Was mentioned.
So an ableist slur instead of the C word. Okay, I don't know what's worse. I don't know what's worse, but nevertheless, that's a really good podcast, and it's I can't remember the point I was going to make, Shaughan. Your ableism's really thrown me there. But it's like that. But if you've got good people involved, how did he get involved with Edinburgh? That's the sort of the questions I'd like to ask. But given the fact that he doesn't seem interested in doing any media work, I suppose these are questions we'll never get a proper answer to.
I mean, I understand it more from his perspective, because I had a look at some of the articles when he left Gretna, in terms of if there was any comments from him about why that happened, and the comments seem to be that he wanted to work
yes,
higher up the pyramid. So it's obviously something that he is keen to do, which I suppose I find surprising for somebody who doesn't want to speak to the media at all. But we'll see how that transpires. I am surprised from an Edinburgh perspective that, I mean, I don't know how many people were interested. I think Ali on the podcast suggests that they already had somebody in mind rather than anybody applying.
That's what he said. I think that's what I was going to say. They'd accepted after. I think it was after Gary Naismith had left the club. They had touted for applications, and that's how Alan Maybury got the job. But for this one, it was just a case of Maybury's out. And I don't know if the timing of that, now that McIndoe's come in, if perhaps Maybury, because the thing is that they had drawn 2 matches in a row. Very unfortunate not to have beaten Cove Rangers. That was like a last-minute own goal that prevented that. And they certainly looked a lot better like against Alloa Athletic the previous week. So they did give the impression that a corner had been turned. So I think that was unusual to see, Alan Maybury's away up the road. And then perhaps with McIndoe coming in without, I don't know if it was all prearranged. I don't know. This is just me.
I mean, yes and no in terms of
thoughts.
In terms of the timing. I agree in terms of the performances that they did look slightly better. 11 defeats in 13 this season and 2 draws. Yeah. I mean, that's sackable.
Yes, no, 100%, and certainly Mark Kerr didn't get any assistant interim manager bounce at the weekend there. So who knows? It'll be certainly a team to keep an eye on. Edinburgh City going for the rest of the season, and a team that we on regional BBC television had told everyone to keep an eye on was Falkirk FC and their game against Hamilton Accies. It's the biggest game in the SPFL so far this season. This is going to be an absolute humdinger. Get back in the house for 5:30. Get BBC Alba on. And holy fuck, this game was absolutely shocking. You spoke, Shaughan, about the length of the highlights for Queen's Park versus Greenock Morton. Falkirk TV, generally a very good highlights package. They could only eke out 3.5 minutes for this. The video itself is 4 minutes 20, but there's time at the start of the players coming on and the graphics coming up with the team lines and a bit at the end with handshakes. It's slim pickings. This was such a disappointment. A disappointment.
It was awful. There were points in the game where I suppose both teams got themselves into decent positions. Falkirk more in the first half, Hamilton more in the second half. But in terms of like decision making or final deliveries, it was awful. It was absolutely atrocious. And I know that like the conditions maybe come into it, or like maybe like I know both teams were hoping for a win, but they were kind of feeling each other out, I suppose, for the majority of the game. It just never got started almost.
I really wish I had something to add to that, but you summed it up so well. It was cagey. That's that. If you want to be polite about it, it was a cagey game of football with 2 teams that were just really like. See, if it was a boxing match, it would just be like, I don't think really anyone threw a punch. It would just sort of get just 2 big lumbering boys just wandering around the ring, and the guys that you would look to, like particularly in Falkirk, like Callum Morrison is in absolutely phenomenal form at the moment. You're looking for him to get something going, Alfie Agyeman to get something going. They never did. Ross McKeever was really starved to service. Like Kevin O'Hara, Ewan Henderson, guys that you think might spark up for Hamilton. It didn't really happen. It was just flat. And it's one of those ones, like watching it at the time, like to think of, like, because I knew we were going to be talking about it, as you and I had discussed this on the Saturday morning, the elements that we were going to discuss. Like looking at it to try and eke out some semblance of discussion, and there really isn't anything. There
might be, again, similar to Raith Rovers Dundee United, they might both have been happy with a point, but for slightly different reasons. I do think that John Rankin probably set himself up for a point. So they're away from home against their title rivals. He's probably fine with that. And John McGuigan is probably okay with a point because they didn't play very well. Like we've spoken about the fact that Falkirk have got far better options up front than Hamilton. It didn't really look like that on the day. But again, they didn't lose any ground. They're still top of the league. John McGuigan is probably happy with that. If there's to be anything to be concerned about, it might be something that we've discussed about John McGuigan a few times in terms of
not being able to beat the big teams.
Well, that and he's just so welded to this formation now.
Yeah, that's those two things.
Say when he was the Rovers manager in terms of this 4-2-3-1, and it's very much easier said than done. But what Hamilton were very good at is Callum Morrison has been banging form this season. They nullified him. Aguiman can be hot and cold. Whether they nullified him or he just had an off day, I'm not sure. Brad Spencer didn't really have any room. And because of all of that, Ross McKeever didn't really get any service.
Yeah.
And McGuigan wasn't really able to change that in any shape or form, partly because there wasn't a huge amount of options on the bench. I totally get that. But if there's a wee bit of a concern from a Falkirk perspective, that might be it.
Yeah, well, that was a seg that I thought you were going to say about Falkirk's inability to win the big games. That was what defined last season. They didn't beat Dunfermline across the 4 matches, 2 draws and 2 defeats. And while a draw at Aki sort of keeps things neck and neck, there's no change at the top of the table there. It just sort of feeds into that you're going to have to win one of these games. Like, I mean, they're probably not going to meet each other till, I'm going to think about December, Christmas time, maybe, when the next time the sides meet each other again. And these are the games that you really need to win, because on the evidence that we've seen so far, both teams are capable of playing some really, really good football. We've seen that from Falkirk, like when they smashed Kelty open 5-1, when they absolutely decimated Annan. They're also capable of digging in and getting results. We saw that against Montrose, where Callum Morrison pulls this thunderbolt out of nowhere. The goal, definitely goal of the season, absolutely incredible goal. Then you look at Hamilton. Hamilton are capable of smashing teams. They did it to Annan Athletic on the Friday last week. They beat them 5-0, but also capable of going the distance and using, I don't know if it's their full-time advantage, just a good attitude amongst the players, but they're capable of going the distance and scoring late goals. So you wonder, I think that there's more question marks here about Falkirk than there are about Hamilton for me.
I agree. I almost felt like they were just kicking the can down the road a bit.
Yeah.
Like maybe until the next Hamilton-Falkirk game. I suppose injuries or suspensions can come into play, so maybe some of them will start to drop more points against the other teams. But no, I suppose similar to Raith and United, that didn't necessarily tell us too much about how the season will pan out, other than it's going to be pretty close at the top of the table and probably closer than I anticipated before the season began.
I thought Scott Martin had a good game. I think this is the sort of game that suited him. Yeah, this is the game that suited him, where you can just scrap and you can just win balls. I'm sure there was one bit this actually made it to the highlights where Brad Spencer's on a dribble and he just comes and just shoves him out of the way and puts the team on the attack again. So he had a good game. Also a really good player, Scott Martin. I always think he's quite underrated. I'm surprised that he's still playing at Hamilton. I thought he could have done a job for, say, a Raith Rovers or a Morton or someone like that. But nevertheless, that's certainly Hamilton Accies' gain is Raith. They've done that the wrong way around. Raith Rovers' loss is Hamilton Accies' gain. Not even that Raith Rovers won for, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. Do you know the only other thing I would maybe mention that I was thinking about on Saturday night, and I did notice on Sunday or Monday or whenever I read it, a comment on Pine Bovril that was actually the opposite of what I was thinking. I remember last season, and for almost the entirety of the season, certainly the last second half of the season, if not more, I was absolutely adamant that 2 teams would get promoted from League One. I was absolutely adamant. But that was more to do with, obviously the quality of Dunfermline, the quality of Falkirk at points last season, and Airdrie ultimately were doing very well and eventually got promotion. I suppose it was more to do with the tripe at the bottom of the Championship. Cove were abysmal. Hamilton were tragic last season, and even Arbroath were pretty wretched. And I did anticipate that whoever finished second bottom of the Championship would go down. Looking at that, and based on the fact I've seen, I think everybody, not quite everybody in the flesh in the Championship, but I'm not quite so sure. Like, let's say it's a Morton or a Queen's Park or an Ayr United that finished 9th. I think if it is Hamilton or Falkirk, I wouldn't necessarily think that it's definitely going to be 2 teams coming up this season. So certainly that whoever's going to be the champion, I think it's going to be vital, because I'm certainly not certain that anybody else is going to be coming up for League One.
Going by, I mean, it's only one game. When you actually see these teams in the flesh, how bad they are at the bottom of the Championship, then there is credence to think that an effervescent side that have had a good season or come into the match full of confidence could do a number on them. Like right now, if you pitted Falkirk against Greenock Morton, I'd fancy Falkirk to absolutely do them. Falkirk are playing Queen's Park at the weekend there in the Challenge Cup. I fancy Falkirk to stick a couple past them. It'd be interesting to see. Because obviously it's very easy to get caught up in the fact that one team's doing well and one team isn't. But there's a reason why the divisions exist, because one team ultimately is better than the other. And with Queen's Park and Morton, Morton, just using these as an example, but Queen's Park, I think they've got the capacity to get better. I do think they will get better as the season goes on. And I think so will Morton as well. But then again, that means somebody's got to get worse, and you're not necessarily seeing any examples of it. I'm kind of going off on a big wild tangent here. I don't want to make any calls about promotion or relegation, but I think you could be right. I think if you want to get out of if you want to get out of League One this season, you're going to have to win it outright.
Yeah, I suppose the comparison is last season. I was like, my goodness, Airdrie seemed quite good, and then they played Hamilton, and they looked stinking. And actually, across the 210 minutes and in penalties, Hamilton were probably a wee bit unlucky over the piece to go down. And I just don't see anybody that is that poor in the Championship this time around. So I just think it is absolutely key, as I suppose it always is, but maybe more so in terms of who wins League One and them coming up, because I think it'll be much more difficult for the second, third, fourth place team to get promotion this time around.
Do you think the Spartans can get promotion from League Two?
Based on what I've seen this season, it's not impossible.
Because they turned in a lot of fun this match where they beat Stranraer 3-4. Because we kind of put this episode, I don't really have a lot of notes for this one, Shaughan, because we were discussing as we mentioned on the Saturday, the games that we'd be talking about. We thought, well, with 3 games, 2 goals, that's shit. The discussion overall has been shit. There'll be people listening to this thinking, wow, you guys normally talk about great moments. This is shit. So, as a bonus, we thought we'd very briefly touch on Stranraer 3, the Spartans 4. I was a knockabout encounter this match that it looked at one point like it was heading for a draw, but then Blair Henderson scores an absolute cracker right at the end to win the match 4-3 for, what's Spartan's nickname?
I don't know.
Spartan sounds like the nickname. It'd be but anyway, the Spartans. Blair Henderson scored for the Spartans.
And if there is any commentary team that you want to give an overview of an absolute slobber knocker, it is very much the Stranraer TV team. An incredible summary. I loved it.
Brian the Body Martin. I was thinking earlier, Shaughan, that if you were because I'm sure I've shared the story about where I was told my time at commentating on Stennismere FC, listen, you got to tone it down a wee bit because the players get these videos and they're not quite happy with it getting picked apart like that. I'm going to imagine that the Stranraer players will watch back the highlights and getting absolutely torn to shreds for making incorrect decisions. I love the guy. Like every time podcast I say, it sounds like I'm being critical. I'm not. I absolutely adore Brian Martin's commentary. But I mean, him and Lawrence Nelson, they did not hold back on this one.
What was who was it that made the for Spartans winner? So bear in mind, like Stranraer, I've come back from 3-1 down. They've made it 3-3. They then go 4-3 down. Who was it that was trying to usher it out of play but made a mistake?
Wasn't it Blair Snedden? Was it Sean McIntosh from trying the boys that were playing fullback
Dolan?
For them?
Wasn't it Dolan? Nah.
Anyway, but that's
regardless, like the fact that his commentary was, let it go, son. What are you doing that for? But like. And I think, because I was trying to ask myself, we watch all these highlights packages, and there are commentators who can be jingoistic, isn't the term? Myopic isn't necessarily the right word. But
jingoistic.
there's people who are clearly all for their club, and that's absolutely fine. And sometimes they can be irritating, but I don't find Stranraer's commentary irritating at all. I think I would enjoy watching a game sat next to them, but maybe part of that is because they don't pander to their own players. Maybe that's that. Maybe I don't know.
I suppose if you want to compare it to the commentary from Edinburgh City against Montrose, where they were beaten 5-2, and the commentator was like saying, he kind of lost it on himself when he forgot how many goals that Montrose had scored, but just like super positive in the wake of a 5-2 win, 5-2 defeat even, super positive in the wake of this. Whereas like Stranraer, I mean, there was the funny bit for me. I properly laughed out loud. This is right at the end of the first half.
Tremendous.
Like they keep on saying like, "Oh, the referee's got to blow his whistle." I remember Brian Martin says like, "I keep saying this, the referee's got to blow his whistle," and straight away the Spartans got the park. Reece Armstrong gets slipped in and shoots that right before the halftime whistle. They want the match finished, and then he goes and scores.
I don't know if you were the same as me. So I always go to the Stranraer highlights first. I just always enjoy them. And
I've got to say as well, man, that the highlights package itself,
that's excellent.
Like excellent. Yep. I know it's like the guys that put together, George Frank, who is a massive help to you and I when we were doing our preview podcast. The love and care that goes into that. See, just the first because when you see it's like 15 minutes, you think, geez, oh man, that's a lot. To be fair, there's 7 goals in the match, so there's a lot to cover. But just the scene setting in terms of who's dropped out for Stranraer, who's coming in, a little bit of statistics, and then a wee bit of information about the Spartans. Just that love and attention, like, goes such a long way. Such a long way. This is, and it's the same for the other teams that pull together highlights. I think that all the highlights packages that we've watched, they're all really, really good stuff. But Stranraer's just that extra layer of production there. It just kicks it on.
But you're right in terms of they were mentioned several times that, well, it must be half time now. That when I clicked on these highlights, I didn't know how the scoring went. I knew how it finished. I didn't know how the scoring was kind of who scored first and when, like the minutes that they scored in. So at this point it was 1-1. It's the 45th minute, and they're making it clear that they are surprised that the game is still going on. And then Stranraer get a corner, but they'd already mentioned twice now that they were amazed that the first half is still continuing. And immediately my brain goes, I'd love it if Spartans scored here. So the corner comes to nothing, and then suddenly Spartans are on the counter. I would imagine that there were Spartans fans in Stair Park who reacted less expressively than myself when that second goal was just slipped in. And in the commentary, oh my dear, oh my dear, oh my dear, pause, oh my dear.
Aye, great stuff. There was things in Stranraer's performance that I quite liked, and one of the things, obviously, having watched the guy for 2 years, thought Tam Orr took his goal really well. And you saw one of the reasons that what made you appreciate how good a goal is because of the quality of the highlights package. You see when I think it's James Dolan's working the ball down. I think it was James Dolan works the ball down the left. Really, really good run. Really good. Does well to make the space for himself. But you can see when he puts that ball into the left, James Craigan switches off for like a fraction of a second, and there's Tam Orr comes steaming in at the back post. And I actually think that going by the highlights, he had a couple of really nice touches, and when he doesn't need to think about stuff, you can see how well he does. And I think that he's had quite a good start. He's got about 4 or 5 goals for the season for Stranraer. I think that's just because they're just using just get balls into him, just where he can hit. 'Cause he's an instinctive finisher. But then you also see like the bad stuff that in this Stranraer team, and perhaps naivety. I thought it was a wee bit overboard to go in hard on the boy for just not letting the ball go out of play, because it's you don't know if the ball's going to stick. He had the ball right in his feet. He's a better judge than folks in the stand if the ball's going to run out of play or if it's going to go. But it's a natural thing to do is want to hook up the park. It didn't work. Who's in the midfield's tracking Blair Henderson or coming in to cover? Because that's the bit there. I mean, it's a really, really good finish from Henderson, like just to sweep it into the net like that. But the defence was really badly exposed there. And I think it's not just the boy failing to get up the park, but just like structurally they looked all over the place. And Scott Agnew really seems like he's got a wee bit of work to do, because that's 4 consecutive defeats. Like prior to that, like when they lost 5-0 at Stennismuir, that was his first league defeat as manager there. Prior to him coming in, they'd a strong, like, I think 3 games undefeated, really positive start to the season. But now it's really fallen off a cliff, and they're in the worst form in the division.
Yeah, I know they have. Quite a young squad. I know they've got injuries at this moment in time. I suppose, as much as I didn't necessarily expect them to be in trouble, I also didn't expect them to maybe trouble the top 4. So maybe they are ultimately at this moment in time where I expected them to be. I think they will improve. I suspect they'll end up being either mid-table or lower mid-table. But as much as they're in poor form at the moment, I don't think they'll get sucked in at the bottom.
Yeah, and fair play to the Spartans as well for still doing well. They've I know you guys spoke about them on last week's podcast. I don't really want to repeat any points that you've made, but to come into the division with largely the same group of players, because they haven't. I think only 5 players came into the club over the summer, and Paul Watson, Peter Watson,
Paul Watson.
Paul Watson, who's Peter Watson used to play for Annan. Sorry. Aye, but Paul Watson coming in wasn't on the bench there. He came in laterally. Danny Denham, I think that was his first start of the season, or second start of the season. Certainly he hasn't featured much. It's only really Craig and Ayrton Sonker, the players that have played on a regular basis. So effectively it's the same group of players. And they're doing well. Whether or not you'll see what happened with Bonnyrigg when all that enthusiasm and it becomes like a slog over the course of the campaign, whether they topple down the table. But nevertheless, there's a lot to be positive about so far. They've been a good, solid addition to the league.
Yeah, I do think they play. I do think they play much better football than Bonnyrigg did or Bonnyrigg do.
Oh, Bonnyrigg are to having seen them there, like watching them at New Dundas Park, it can be effective, but my God, I would not want to go and watch that kind of football every week. It's attritional, it's brutal, and it's not great.
And the only other thing I was going to say about Spartans is, as much as the game finished 4-3, and it sounds like it might have been on a knife edge when you watch the highlights back, is they probably could have won by more. I thought they were thoroughly deserved winners. So I now, from thinking that again they might have enough about them to finish 7th, 6th, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're challenging in the top 4 places this season.
Yeah, you're kind of waiting though for Forfar Athletic and East Fife to get their act together, because I think that the top 3 is going to be Peterhead. Peterhead have started the season a lot better than anticipated. I'm going to put that down to thinking they were just such a basket case last term. Coming down, it would just be a season of consolidation, and getting like a nice mid-table finish would be good for them. I think McAllister and Shanks have formed a really, really strong partnership together. They look like they're really going to have a successful season. Dumbarton, always one defeat away from wanting Stephen Farrell hung from the top of the Dumbarton Rock, but they were, I think they. A really good win over Clyde at the weekend, and Stenhousemuir have had a good start to the season after their 8 matches. So I think
there's a space available.
There's a space available. I think it's aye, and I think the Spartans have as good a chance to the likes of Forfar, East Fife. But who knows? Who knows? It's been a good season so far. I like it when you can't call it. That's probably one of the things about sticking your balls out in the line, is that people will make fun of your balls, but I don't mind. I don't mind doing it. That's part of the fun. That's why we do it, Shaughan. That's why we do it.
People make fun of your balls.
Oh, well, you know what I mean. Not literally, just your opinion on things.
No, I know what you mean. I was getting a real hard time when the Rovers lost to Airdrie online. A couple of Airdrie fans got in contact to say get that right up you, because I said Airdrie would struggle this season. I thought it was a reasonable point to make. I thought they would struggle.
It's like I genuinely don't care. The only team that I want to see do well is Stenhousemuir Football Club, and I maybe have a laugh if like Falkirk struggle. But I mean, Falkirk, I've had it for like 5 years, like laughing at Falkirk. You know what I mean? It will still be funny. It won't ever be as funny as the Craxton Big Sexy when they just needed what was like a point out their last 6 games to finish in the playoffs, and ended up but then that was during the COVID period, so a lot of the stuff in there doesn't count. But no, as long as Stenhousemuir are doing well, that is ultimately the most important thing. And it's quite quite funny to see teams that you don't like slipping up, but that's the most important thing. So if I've said a team that are going to struggle this season turn out to do well, I do not care. I honestly do not care. But yeah, if you want to have a crack at guys like Shaughan, guys who is putting his balls out there, then by all means, you know where to find him, at Shaughan M on Twitter. Always happy to get in touch with you. Is there anything else to be said about the Scottish lower leagues?
I don't think so. I think we've covered the hottest topics.
I think we have as well. I think that was good fun, Shaughan. Good fun. Good to get the lower league podcast on Thursdays back in an even keel. I think that's the most important thing than anything else.
I think the listeners are the happy ones here.
Yeah, they'll be like, my goodness, that player does play for that club. Wow, thank God. But we're not going to record the Patreon because Shaughan and I, we've got an episode of A View from the Terrace to prepare for, so that's going to take up the rest of the evening. But although Shaughan and I aren't doing a Patreon, there's tons of stuff that's on there. Like I mentioned there, the one with Ali Moncrief on the Patreon account. If you don't subscribe to it, go and do it because it's a great listen, and there's tons of good stuff in there. There's Fowler and Amy Canavan talked about the SWPL. There's on the fence sort of stuff. So even if that doesn't sound like it's for you, there will be something there. This is the most prolific podcast in the business. I'm going to assume it's the most prolific podcast in the business. I don't subscribe to any other football podcasts.
Me neither, but I would agree with you. I can't imagine somebody else churns out a podcast a day.
Yes, exactly. But nevertheless, if you're going to a game this weekend, if you've got a Challenge Cup match, if you're watching Scotland tonight, enjoy yourself. Please do so respectfully. Do not walk into a Spanish restaurant and chuck a steam tray of paella about because you think it'll be funny, because it won't be. Treat these people with respect.
A steam tray of paella.
I don't know what these things. I just like walking away and just like fucking yep, you're Rodri and chucking a steam tray around.
Well, that sounds very disrespectful.
It does, and that's what I'm calling for, Shaughan. I'm calling for more respect in the game. More respect.
Well, let's hope we get it.
Let's hope we get it. Let's hope the steam trays in the Spanish restaurants around Scotland remain intact over the weekend. And on that note, Shaughan, absolute pleasure as always.
No worries, thank you. Take care.
Take care. We will speak to you soon.